Judith Butler's Undoing Gender revisits and expands her earlier work on gender performativity. Butler addresses the urgent political, ethical, and clinical questions that arise when we try to dismantle restrictive norms governing sex, gender, and desire. The central paradox of the book is captured in its title. To undo gender can mean two very different things. On one hand, it refers to the violent, damaging effects that rigid social norms have on human lives when those norms fail to recognize certain bodies, making them unlivable or abject. On the other hand, it refers to a deliberate, emancipatory political practice, the process of becoming undone in a productive sense. This means breaking free from prior restrictive definitions of identity to create a more livable, expansive way of existing. Butler asks us to hold both meanings in tension. A foundational idea in Undoing Gender is Butler's critique of atomistic individualism. Gender is never simply something we freely choose or possess in isolation. Though gender is a kind of doing, an incessant performance enacted without full conscious willing, it is fundamentally a practice of improvisation within an inescapable scene of social constraint. We are, we are always doing our gender with or for another person, embedded within a social fabric whose terms we never chose. This dependency brings us directly to the problem of recognition. Drawing on the Hegelian tradition, Butler notes that desire is fundamentally bound up with a quest for recognition, the deep seated need to be acknowledged by others as a socially viable human being. Recognition is not a neutral or benevolent gift, it is a profound site of power. The social norms that confer humanness draw a sharp line between those who qualify as recognizable human subjects and those who are cast outside into the realm of the less than human or the unlivable. Depending on race, bodily morphology, sex, and ethnicity, certain lives are validated while others are systematically denied the conditions necessary for flourishing. This creates a profound dilemma. If we seek recognition within prevailing social norms, we risk accepting terms that pathologize or destroys us. If we reject those norms to preserve our freedom, we risk social illegibility and estrangement. Critical agency emerges precisely from this impossible juncture. From our capacity to maintain a critical transformative distance from the very norms upon which our social existence depends. Butler applies this theoretical framework to concrete political and institutional battlegrounds. She engages closely with the new gender politics forged by transgender, intersex, and feminist movements. First, she examines the medical and surgical practices historically imposed on intersex infants and child born with anatomically non-binary traits. Coercive normalization surgeries performed without consent expose how deeply normative medical institutions police the boundaries of idealized human morphology. By framing intersex bodies as pathologies that require immediate correction, medical regimes enforce a rigid standard of what counts as a recognizable human life. Butler supports intersex activism that demands the cessation of non consensual surgeries, treating the intersex embodiment as a natural variation along the human continuum. Second, she offers a sharp critique of diagnostic frameworks like the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders (DSM) category of Gender Identity Disorder (GID). This diagnosis treats gender variance as a psychological pathology, enforcing a compulsory alignment between assigned birth sex and gender representation. The diagnosis pathologizes trans individuals. At the same time, she highlights a profound structural paradox. While the GID diagnosis pathologizes trans individuals, it has historically functioned as an indispensable bureaucratic key required to secure medical insurance coverage for transition related care or legal name and sex marker changes. This forces trans subjects into a painful compromise. They must submit to a pathologizing institutional gaze in order to access the material conditions necessary for bodily self realization. This is a trap with no easy way out. Expanding beyond individual identity, Butler addresses the shared condition of vulnerability. Because our bodily existence is radically exposed to others before we ever have a chance to consent to it, vulnerability is an inescapable dimension of social life. We are born dependent. We remain dependent throughout our lives. Dominant political systems often attempt to wall off this vulnerability through aggressive state security and sovereign policing. But Butler argues that acknowledging our fundamental exposure to one another can form the basis for a more ethical, radically interdependent global community. This vulnerability is intimately tied to the question of kinship. Butler critiques conservative efforts to restrict kinship exclusively to traditional conjugal heterosexual marriage frameworks. When the state ties social legitimacy, medical rights, and economic survival strictly to the marriage form, it renders alternative relational networks such as queer households, chosen families, and non monogamous alliances abject and illegitimate. These alternative forms of kinship are denied recognition and support. A truly progressive politics must decouple human rights, support structures, and recognition from the narrow confines of the nuclear family. We need to open up new imaginative horizons for social belonging. Butler also emphasizes that vulnerability is not simply weakness. It is also the condition of possibility for ethical responsiveness. When we recognize our shared exposure to harm, we can build solidarity across difference. This is not about denying our differences. It is about recognizing that our differences do not have to become barriers to mutual care and support. Butler's Undoing Gender challenges us to rethink the very grammar of human life. By exposing how social norms differentially confer humaneness, pathologize bodily variation, and regulate kinship, Butler provides us with the vital theoretical tools. True political emancipation does not lie in securing a fixed, static identity within oppressive systems. It lies in our collective capacity to continually interrogate, reshape, and undo the restrictive terms that constrain human flourishing. Butler asks us to embrace a kind of productive undoing. We must be willing to let go of rigid definitions and fixed categories. We must be open to becoming something we cannot yet imagine. This is not an easy task. It requires courage and vulnerability. But it is the only path toward a world where all bodies can live and thrive. This is the profound and lasting contribution of Butler. It does not offer easy answers. Instead, it opens up new ways of thinking about identity, recognition, and the politics of livable life.